Welcome to the Nehemiah Week community. I'm your host, Patrice. Tsague. I'm here with my co-MC for Nehemiah Week, Susan Schramm. Well, second day, Susan. The first day is always kind of a bit nerve-wracking because there's a lot of uncertainty in the air. By this time, it feels like a bicycle. How do you feel?
Yeah, well, it's funny because it is for the staff and all these people all over the world who are doing the production, but it also is for the attendees, right? Because not everybody, I'm always amazed when I look in the chat how many people go, "This is amazing." Just the idea that it's so global.
Yeah.
Just the idea that they have the ability to connect with people and have breakout rooms and everything. It's delightful to see. But by today, they're sort of getting in the groove of how to do this. So yeah, we're going to be fine.
And we do kick it off with a prayer time, which sets the tone and in worship. That kind of comes, yes, this morning was from Mexico. Yesterday was from Paris. Tomorrow we'll get back to Mexico, Paris. But I was intrigued by Pastor Noella, who kicked off our devotional time today. And he literally taught from his pulpit. I mean, to me, I'm anxious. I mean, I'm looking for a pulpit for next year for myself.
Yeah. And it's interesting also, the translation was amazing. So he was emphatic. He was exhorting us. He was calling us to feel strongly about this fact that we're going to be able to get through a crisis. And his daughter, the translator, did an amazing job. You felt the same emotion. And I really feel like that part was on Facebook, right? It was in public.
So yeah, that was public. That was on Facebook. You're right.
People can go back to our Facebook site and YouTube and see that part of our content that was just, incredible.
Yes, and here's what Pastor, little nuggets on terms of what he shared. I mean, he gave us some nice little point, and it was in French, of course, but as you stated, it was nicely translated in terms of. By the way, let me ask you, Susan, as an American, because most of the time, most of us who are only English speakers, we have a hard time receiving a message with that translation dynamic. How is it for you, or have you gotten used to it?
Oh, I think it was fascinating because I think it's humbling, right? It always keeps reminding me of the fact that in Acts, the Lord was able to speak to everybody directly through their own language, and they all could hear the disciples speaking to them. And then we have to do this sort of translation. But I think it was a great reminder that his passion and his call to actions were so clear. And that it's global, that no matter where you are in the world, no matter where you come from, no matter what language you speak, these truths about how to thrive in a crisis are just they resonate deeply across the whole world.
Wow. It's multicultural. He gave us some key points. The first thing he said, five things in terms of crisis. First, God has to direct you. And then he says, second, remember God's promises. Third, he said, do something. I like that. And then he says, time to persevere. And he concluded with that it's time for us. You got to be careful with your words.
Oh yeah.
And that's such a powerful, because sometimes we speak our feelings and not our convictions and beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because you picked up on that in your part of the agenda too. The whole, what we speak out loud actually affects our mindset. Yes. It affects our attitude, and we know it's temporary, right? And that picks up on what Pastor Moore said the day before. I mean,
that's right.
The thing is, we when we're in a crisis, our feelings tend to win, and at that moment, you really know you have to go back and be careful of how you're allowing your tongue to speak. I also love it. He's like a Nike commercial, like just do it, right?
That's right.
There's no excuses, just do it.
And then I had to pick up from there and kind of now lay the framework for our talk. And so one of the things that I talked about is understanding what does it look like to thrive amidst a crisis, using David, one of my favorite stories in scripture. By the way, Susan, this is about months before he becomes king, that this incident happens to him.
And I really never jumped into that. And there was a whole discussion about the fact that he, had this place of refuge he was going to go to get away from from his
Yeah, from sun. Yeah.
and yet when he got there, it was on fire. And I thought, isn't that the case? And didn't we hear so many biblical entrepreneurship stories where, okay, things are bad. I'm just going to, pull back. And then it got worse. How do you get through that? I thought that was really relevant.
That is true. It's an incredible thing. Great story to read. And then from there, by the way, we're talking about Nehemiah Week, a recap. If you missed it, you can catch it tomorrow. Go to nehemiahweek.com or go to our website so you can register and be a part of it. By the way, if you register, you get a chance to buy next year's at $49. Real huge savings. You want to take advantage of that. So then I kind of teed you up and you really made it practical. So last year, you taught us about de-risking. Now, what I love about you, Susan, is that you always, you don't like repeating yourself. You're this constant moving innovation. And so I just like how you took it, you looked at it from another angle. And you kind of said to us, inherent to crisis is this idea of risk. Now, it makes sense, it's logical, but we don't think about that.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting is, well, number one, the issue is that when you lead other people in the middle of a crisis, you have two levels of challenge, right? You're leading yourself, and you feel a sense of risk, but then you're leading other people who look to you to have a plan, and you're making it up a little bit as you go, right? And that sense of risk, I'm fascinated with. And as you know, in my business, I spend a lot of time helping people be thoughtful about this issue of risk, because back to the mindset, that fearfulness of the risks, what are the risks, can be quite debilitating. It can be quite challenging. And so then I've been doing a lot of research in this and found so much research out there that talks about the fact that everybody's profile of how they feel about risk is different. It's based on so many things. It's based on where they come from, their past. It's based on their national culture. It's based on their age. It's based on, like, kids during the pandemic are going to have a different feeling about the risk of a virus than many of us grew up with, right? So that idea that everybody's different in our risk, and that we have to give grace to that, and that we really need to recognize that everybody has their own risk fingerprint and be thoughtful as we lead, because the idea of openly talking about risk is something that somehow, there's this two mindsets, right? There's this buck it up, don't let yourself sulk, get over it, right? There's that. But the flip side of that is, the mind games that come from fear. And so having an open conversation about what are the possible what ifs. And it's funny because later speakers had the same recommendation, but this idea that you can proactively talk and systematically identify what risks and what you would do so that people can sleep at night. And then when they see those issues and challenges coming up, they have a game plan. So it was a good opportunity.
And I think talking through it is not inconsistent with being positive about it, because actually, if you are positive about it, you need to talk through it. In other words, hiding from it and not allowing dialogue for it. I have a friend whose company right now, they're dealing with a COVID situation, COVID breakout, in part because he won't allow the discussion. Right. And so the employees are scared because of the denial within the organization, that he won't allow an open dialogue about the reality.
I think what we're realizing is when we think about strategy, when you think about, I think sometimes the COVID world, we think, oh, that's a COVID issue. If you step back and say, okay, say it's losing your biggest customer. Say it's, oh, what are we going to do? I hear that our best employee is looking outside. There's a lot of different things that can create risk and fear and rumor mongers and people losing comfort that there's a game plan. And sometimes it just takes being just incredibly open and saying, you know what, we don't have all the answers right now, let's figure out what would we do. Let's talk about it. What's the worst case scenario? Where would we go? And that will calm. Science says that'll calm us down. Our brains will relax and we'll be able to listen and sleep better and move forward. So yeah, I left people with a few action items, but the idea was, number one, uncertainty reigns. It will always be uncertainty. We now are living with a huge tsunami of uncertainty, but it will be, in the future. And secondly, that the idea is everybody's different in their view of risk. Don't shame them for their risk. Be open to the fact that everybody has their right to their risk profile. And third, there's things you can do that if you have purpose if you know what you're doing in context of purpose, you can actually mitigate the risk.
Mm. Marcus, good to see you. Marcus joins us from India. And then, of course, our beloved Samantha. Why don't we love Samantha? Samantha, go to sleep. She says, another great session today. Thank you, Susan and Patrice, for emceeing the conference. Thank you, Samantha. And so much to go today. Samantha, thank you so much. Samantha is just incredible. And then Brent, I like the 3 Ds. He kind of introduced us with, DOL, divorce, depression. Oh my God, how depressing. For those who don't know, DOL is in the security business, is the Department of, I forgot what the L stands for. But anyway, it's a government agency that supervises those business security. Now, so this was kind of a real life application. His zigzag was attacked, right? His place of safety, his company, his life, his family. What do you think of how Brent just his journey and the lessons learned from that journey?
It's I think when you hear about someone who's gone through not just one crisis, right? It was iterative crisis. And he used as milestones these wonderful celebrations, these big sales celebrations where everybody gets together for top performers at his company. And each year, he as a leader would walk in with anxiety, right? And there were different types of anxiety. Sometimes it was he was going through a divorce and he knew he'd always come there with his wife. And sometimes it was he was losing employees. And sometimes there was potential issues of consolidation. And I think, again, going back to leading in a crisis, he recognized and was on his knees saying, I got to stick with my principles. I need to know why I'm here. And even through the decision making that he was doing, he'd always challenge, what are my values? What do I value? Does this make sense in light of my values? And rejected many potential companies that he might work with. Recognize that he might lose some employees, but he was going to stick with his values through the crisis.
Wow. And indeed he did. He did. And Thursday, we're going to hear from his father. There's a what was that again?
Prequel. There's a
prequel to that. I mean, his father went through something crazy that he made it through. So we had Pam Wolf. Pam is just a doll. And she gave us these tips, if you will. So, Pam created Identity and Destiny, her and her husband both, and it was just good having her. So when you've been through Identity and Destiny, how was it for you? Was that the first time you heard Pam speak, by the way?
Yeah, and it's interesting because the Identity and Destiny program, which is now a fundamental building block of biblical entrepreneurship, is a very thought-provoking program. And the fact that she told the story of how they decided to do this, and that they themselves, even as they were going through, would wonder if this is their calling or not. And her clarity that she used, what I hadn't thought about was in light of a crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she, when I took the ID&D, we call it the Identity and Destiny program, it was in light of my business, like the future. I was starting a business. This is great. I was building a strategy, and start with who you are as the founder, as the entrepreneur, and what are your values and what is your purpose. But she then put it in context of, in light of that, if you know your purpose, what is it that you're going to do that you're going to stand true to in light of a crisis? And I thought that was a helpful repositioning.
Yeah. And we took that into breakout. I didn't see the other breakout, but in the French breakout, we contrast Saul and David.
Hmm.
Looked at how Saul dealt with the crisis of knowing that his reign was coming to an end and his son will not succeed him. That was a crisis for him, crisis of legacy, a crisis of leadership. And the fact that the very mentor, the very person he was grooming would be as a threat to his kingdom, the opposition. And then David, his crisis was being ordained as the future king. Now he's dealing with the fact that the guy who he's going to replace wants to kill him, right? Literally. And how both of them dealt with that crisis. One reverted back to his identity in Christ, which was David. And then Saul reverted to his identity in his position, his security. He identified his security was more tied into the title, the leadership role, the kingdom versus Christ. And both of those, led to flourishing, the other led to disaster. In looking at that idea and the importance of identity.
The other thing that Pam, it's interesting you say that, because that idea of how to go back to it and rethink where my purpose fits in this decision making, right? She reminded everybody who's ever been through the program to go back and revisit it.
Yes.
And if you haven't, and you really need to, this is fundamental to really having a GPS, right? It's having the fundamental relationship with God that gives you, like, why are you here? But the fact is, it's not done. In other words, I'm sure that this uncovering of, now let me go back to my purpose. Let me go back to why I'm called, and the difference between my assignment, as you just talked about, the difference. So that title of king is just an assignment. It's not his identity.
Exactly.
Contrast, right?
Yes. So she gave us 5, based on studies, 5 business takeaways from COVID. I'm going to give it to you free of charge, no cost to you listeners and viewers. 1, be prepared. 2, resilience, which identity deals with. 3rd, stay adaptive. 4th, make a plan. And 5, don't underestimate technology. Then, Susan, we did something a little interesting. As we went to breakout, after the breakouts, we did some connect meetings. Now, for those of you who are watching and listening, one of the things we do encourage.
We did art first.
That's right. I'm sorry. We did art. Yeah, let's talk about that. Invest with purpose.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because, so many times when we think about crisis, there's always some sort of financial implication involved. People lose their jobs. People lose their homes. There's or a crisis of not getting funding for a new business venture. Investors leave. There's a lot of that. But the other part of it is your own assets and how to stay true to your tithing, to your saving, to your alignment of your investments, personal investments, with your purpose and with your beliefs. So that's what Art Alley, who's the CEO of Timothy Plan, spoke about with you.
Yeah, he did. My favorite line that he says, God's shoving us through keyholes.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that God takes us through difficult situation as part of shaping who we are, because we can trust him, but he's not always certain. He can trust us.
Yeah, that was powerful.
Incredible.
That down. Yeah, when you realize that some of this is, am I trustworthy?
Yes.
Not only is God trustworthy, you start with, gosh, am I? And he challenged our thinking. So again, then we went to the connect, right?
Yeah, we're doing this recap of Nehemiah Week. If you've not yet registered for it, you can still do that. We still got tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we're going to conclude on Saturday. So, Susan, we then had our Connect meeting. Now, for those of you who are new to Nehemiah Project, Connect meetings is the idea that we have these throughout the year. Our various centers have these networking activities where they bring members together for the purpose of going deeper with them in relationship, connecting, working to business again. So we call them Connect meetings. What we've done also is during our events, we have mini Connect meetings. Today we had 2 10-minute Connect meetings. Get to my Connect meetings. There's no translations.
Okay, so here's the deal, you guys. I've never been part of these, and we're so confident this is going to work. And so the idea was, say you were sitting on an airplane. This is what you said. You're sitting on an airplane. You get your seat. You get your ticket. Sit down, and you turn turn to the right, and that person grins at you, and you realize they don't speak your language.
That's right.
The person next to you doesn't speak your language, and you got a long flight. And or you could be at the airport just standing there waiting, and you figure like, well, how, it's a little awkward, right? It's a little awkward, but over time, over that flight, you sort of might figure out ways to connect and learn something about the person around you. So we did that virtually, right? We did exactly that, but we just did it randomly, and everybody got thrown into situations they've never been in before and met people from around the world. It was fascinating.
That was neat. So join us tomorrow. Susan, I'm going to ask you to give me a little tip before we wrap up. Before we do, a little commercial about tomorrow. Kathy Mears is watching. Kathy, thank you. Kathy says excellent. Kathy is in with us. By the way, Tom Mears speaks tomorrow. Let's go quickly about tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to have our third day of the conference, which we're going to tomorrow kick off with Pastor Moore again. He's going to come back. We'll have worship. Join us tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and then I will share on part 2 of what I began today. And then we're going to have somebody who's new to our family, Dr. Shalette from Harvard University. She's going to deal with pivoting in midst of crisis. And then we're also going to have Tom and Jennifer Mears are going to talk about how to serve with love. Guys, if you miss nothing else, everything in this conference, you want to catch this one, because this family, Susan, have gone through the mud. But in the midst of it all, they've stayed true to their mission statement personally, which is serve with love. And so we're going to get into that and talk more about that. And then we'll do some breakouts about serve with love. And then we'll wrap up. We'll also have Shay Bynes tomorrow.
I can't wait to see Shay. Right.
Shay's coming. Yeah, Shay's going to talk about, I love the title, grind over grace in midst of, grace
over grind. Right.
In midst of crisis. So if you're not yet signed up, you want to do that and join us. So Susan, from your talk today, you get some good insights. As a matter of fact, I took a little notes. So you said we have to do a systematic approach. We have to openly talk about crisis, and you have to build our risk muscle. So our viewers and listeners who weren't there today, so if they get nothing else, what should they get about today from what your talk was as they deal with crisis?
I'd say that at the end of the day, risk and crisis is not something that you wait and react to. You absolutely recognize it's there. It's going to be there. It's like water. It's like we're goldfish in a big tank, and it's all around us. And so your choice is to decide how you're going to approach it, to be proactive. And the fundamental foundation will be, do you know your purpose? If you know why you're created, if you know why you're here, if you're trying to accomplish something in context of a bigger call or a bigger reason, risk will be less scary. Risk will be easier. It'll be easier to lead others because you know where you're going. You know why you're working your business. You know why you're managing this organization. You know why you're leading your family, because you have a larger context. And so as a result, you can sleep knowing that there's a longer game here.
I love it. That's good advice. As you were sharing, my mind went like this. So if I am on purpose and I'm walking out in my gifting and call, my destiny, I know there's always going to be trouble. There's going to be risk. But in the midst of that, I am safe, not because of my circumstance, because of my skill set, because I'm walking out destiny. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Right. That's right. It just makes the bigger reason, makes the denominator so much bigger, so that the risk on top of that, the numerator, is less impactful, and you can breathe knowing that you are a child of Christ.
I've never been in the army, but I'm thinking about that's how generals and military heroes feel. Because when they believe in the greater purpose, them going to war doesn't feel as scary, because they even say studies show that when they no longer believe in the righteousness of their cause, fear goes up.
Right.
Wow, good stuff. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Hey, join us tomorrow. You can still do that by going to NehemiahWeek.com, Nehemiah.com. You can also go to our website to know more about Nehemiah Project. NehemiahEcommunity.com. There you can learn about training, how we can come alongside you and equip you to walk our purpose, coaching, how we can bring coaches alongside you to help you walk our purpose, and access to capital, how we can help you connect with investors to be able to grow your company. Last but not least, how to become a member. Membership does have its benefits. So join us. With that said, let me pray for you. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord enable you to steward those talents that are under your care, to steward them in such a way that one day you'll hear those wonderful words. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. He'll now make you rule over much. God bless you. Thank you, Susan. See you all tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.